Hello there everyone, your fluffy armchair Admiral Latter is back with some more hot ship action. Today's episode of Lots of Guns series about Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, we are going to talk about standard type New Mexico class battleship of the United States Navy. We will begin from building our warship and then we will send her to 3 versus 3 battle with Imperial Japanese battleship of similar era. So without any further ado, let's get started. We will begin from selecting appropriate hull for our build. Unfortunately, due to game limitations at this moment, the best hull for New Mexico is available only in 1924, while historically the ship was commissioned in 1917. She displaced of around 32,000 long tons, and we will see if we can match that when we finish. Because I need this hull to offer me certain amounts of mounting points, I will set the displacement slider at 51,400 tons though. Her propulsion, as every other standard type battleship, allowed her to reach 21 knots top speed. On paper, while sailing at relatively low speed of 10 knots, ships could reach operational range of around 8,000 nautical miles. However, in reality, including extra drag added by marine life growing on its bottom, she could effectively reach of around 5,200 nautical miles, which was pretty average at that time. Her main propulsion of 4 Curtiss turbines with steam provided by 9 oil-fired Babcock and Wilcox boilers. Additionally, New Mexico was equipped with turbo-electric system to transfer engine power into propeller shafts. When it comes to protection, ships of this class were following standardized specifications, which means they used crab armor plate for their main belt. Their barbettes were relatively thick. The ship was also equipped with a pair of torpedo bulges and double hull bottom. Thanks to weight saving solutions, her bulkheads were significantly reinforced. And as every other standard type vessel, her citadel was constructed in all or nothing configuration. When it comes to armor values, they were as follows. Main belt 13.5 inch. Belt extended 8 inch. Deck, both main and extended 3.5 inch. Conning tower was protected by 16 inch of armor and turret faces were 18 inch thick, with turret top going down to 5 inch. Unfortunately, I got no clear information about secondary or casemate armor, but I assume it was up to 2.5 inch thick. Now, let's go on to armament. But before we begin putting any guns on her deck, let's install her front and rear tower along with the funnel. And there is a few words I'd like to say about it. Originally, when the ship was commissioned in 1917, she used cage masts. However, those were later removed in her latest refits in 1920s and 1930s. I will try to put her together using configuration that is as close to 1917 as possible. Hence why I'll use cage masts even though they won't let me to install other elements in the right places and will make deck of that ship look rather empty. Her main armament consisted of 12 14-inch guns mounted in 4 triple towers placed in super firing positions, with 2 at the front and 2 at the stern of the ship. A point worth noting about these is that they were significantly improved compared to those used on Pennsylvania class that preceded New Mexico, and each gun could fire individually, making them more resilient to enemy fire and preventing of whole turret being disabled if there is any malfunction. Her secondary armament consisted of 14 5-inch guns mounted in casemates and 4 3-inch guns in high-angle mounts for anti-air purposes. In addition to that, ship was also equipped with 2 21-inch underwater torpedo launchers, one on each broadside. As for propellant, I will use TNT. Why is that, you ask? Well, originally, United States Navy used silk bags with smokeless powder to fire their shells, but inside them there was a substance called explosive D, or dunit, which is pretty much direct predecessor to TNT. I know it sounds a bit complicated, but as propellants in the game are generally completely messed up, I find it the most accurate choice to go for at this moment. Or at least that is according to quite deep research I had to go through Wikipedia to find any info about it. I will also take increased amount of torpedoes, because originally those ships took 6 torpedoes per launcher, while game provides only 4 with standard load. When it comes to additional equipment, I couldn't find any accurate info about rangefinder or radio equipment that was used on that ship. So I'm just going to use Mark IV stereoscopic rangefinders and improved radio without radar. That concludes our build. Let's now take her for a spin, and as the battle is loading, I would like to remind you to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to hit that bell button so you won't miss out on anything new on my channel. Let's now talk about history of those ships, beginning from description what standard type battleship actually is. So whoever might not know, it was a series of 12 battleships split between 5 classes. They were ordered by United States Navy between 1911 and 1916 and commissioned between 1916 and 1923. Each ship of this type was a modernized version of its predecessor, but built within the same operational characteristics. This allowed those ships to operate together in any configuration despite years of difference between ships, allowing for better flexibility in fleet compositions if some ships were not available. It was a good strategy for as long as battleships were considered main naval force, and as soon as aircraft carriers started to dominate the seas, the need for fast and more agile battleships arose and put an end to standard type. Standard type classes were as follows: Nevada class, Pennsylvania class, New Mexico class, Tennessee class, and Colorado class. As for their standardized characteristics, those included all or nothing armor scheme designed operational range of around 8,000 nautical miles, top speed of 21 knots, and tactical turn radius of 700 yards. Finally, all main guns organized on center line in fore and aft turrets with no amidship guns. Let's now focus on New Mexico class itself. As I probably mentioned that before, First ship of the class was commissioned on 18th of December 1917, and it was not USS New Mexico, as most of you would probably assume. First ship of New Mexico class to be commissioned into United States Navy was Mississippi, and it was not until 20th of May 1918 until New Mexico entered service. However, she was still named the lead ship of the class, most likely due to her very innovative turbo-electric drive that most likely slowed down her construction. Anyway, after they entered the service, ships were initially assigned to Atlantic Fleet. First significant task of New Mexico was to escort passenger ship George Washington with Woodrow Wilson on board to France for the Versailles Peace Conference. Mississippi was mostly conducting training operations in southeast coast USA, and Idaho, who was commissioned in March 1919, received her first task to transport President of Brazil back to his country. Later on that year, all three ships of this class were transferred to Pacific Fleet, with New Mexico to become a flagship. In 1920s and 1930s, ships of this class were going through a series of exercises called fleet problems and modifications based on experience from those. Fleet problems highlighted the need of a new fast battleships to keep up with aircraft carriers for which New Mexico class were too slow. In mid-1940, fleet was eventually transferred briefly to Hawaii in response to rising tensions between the United States and Japan, following the outbreak of Second Sino-Japanese War. However, by 1941, ships were transferred to join neutrality patrols on the Atlantic. They were mostly escorting transport ships between United States, like East Coast, and Iceland, if I remember correctly. And they haven't seen any action with German submarines. Anyway, it was only after Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor that the ships were reassigned back to the Pacific Fleet. They spent first year patrolling and escorting convoys on the west coast of the United States. In early 1943, they took part in Aleutian Islands campaign, with Idaho serving as flagship during bombardment of islands of Attu and Kiska. Later on that year, all three New Mexicos took part in the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaign, which was the first step to drive across Central Pacific by United States. In June 1944, Idaho and New Mexico took part in Mariana and Palau Island campaign, while Mississippi was going through refit just to join the fleet back in September to basically replace New Mexico that was next in the queue for her refit. So both Idaho and Mississippi were tasked to actually bombard island of Peleliu to aid in landing operations back there, and it was basically the last battle of Mariana's campaign. And later on that year, or later on the same year, which was 1944, Mississippi took part in the last battleship battle in history. but because she was still equipped with an old model radar, she was struggling to find a target in the darkness and managed to fire only one salvo. Anyway, by January 1945, New Mexico finally rejoined the fleet and, along with Mississippi, supported the amphibious assault during invasion of Lingayen Gulf, or on the island of Luzon, if I remember correctly. Both ships were struck by kamikaze attacks during that battle, and they both remained in operation until February, when they finally departed to Pearl Harbor for repairs. In the meantime, while the New Mexico and Mississippi were repaired, Idaho has finished her refit and took part in Battle of Iwo Jima. And she was quickly joined by remaining two of her sister ships, just in time to support the invasion of Okinawa in May 1945. During this battle, New Mexico and Mississippi were once more struck by kamikaze attack, and Idaho got damaged by a near miss. New Mexico was also hit by a bomb, forcing her to withdraw for repairs immediately, while Idaho and Mississippi could continue until the end of the battle, and they basically retired after the battle for repairs themselves. Eventually, all three ships were fully repaired just in time to participate in the initial occupation of Japan between August and September that same year. Shortly after the war, New Mexico and Idaho unfortunately got decommissioned and sold for scrap. Mississippi, however, was assigned as a gunnery training vessel and replaced an old battleship Wyoming. She was used to test various new weapons, including anti-air missiles, up until 1956, when she was finally decommissioned and sold for scrap. And that is it for today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed the story and the battle in the background. If you did, give the video a like and smash that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to turn on the notifications by pressing the bell button afterwards. That way you won't miss out more content in the future. Finally, don't forget to share your comments down below the video. Have a great day and see you all later. Later. Out.